Hello, Crafty Friends. This is Jen, and thank you for joining me today. Today I have 3 Christmas cards for you, all using Karen Burniston's new Postage Pop-Up, along with her new snow charms and 3 of her new sentiment stamps. For the first card, we are going to be making a Christmas Treats side fold A2 Christmas card. And along with the Postage Pop-Up, we will also be using her Sweet Treats sentiment stamp set and Fawn's Not a Creature Was Stirring stamp set as well. So to start, I'm using this very pretty, vibrant Fawn cardstock called Tomato. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I apologize if I'm wrong. And I have this pretty Echo Park Christmas paper that I found, and it's like a baking paper pack. I will have it listed in the description box below for you. I liked the gingerbread frosting look on this one, and I thought it would go well. As well with this card, we will be using Karen Burniston's baking charms. So to start, I die cut my card base from the red cardstock to make a side fold A2 size card. And the best part is when you can get 2 cards out of 1 sheet of cardstock. So I'm just adding my pattern paper for the background. And I'm using a double-sided adhesive tape for that, which is 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive tape. And I fold down the sides of the adhesive tape and then place the pattern paper onto the cardstock, but I only tear down just a little bit so that you can maneuver the paper around so it fits exactly where you want it. This is the pop-up mechanism for the Postage Pop-Up. It's a very, very simple pop-up mechanism. I'm just folding on all of the fold lines, and I'm using my bone folder so I get a good crisp fold. Folding the tab. And you can see it just makes like a little box. And then this little pull tab here, it has only 1 fold to it. And it slides into the little cutout at the back. And then to install it into the card, you're going to turn it upside down. And you want to put that pull tab, that tiny little tab at the front of the pull tab, butt it right up against the card edge. So I'm just using my Lineco neutral pH adhesive in a fine tip bottle to add the glue. And I'm going to fold the back part of my card up so I get a good placement. And you want to make sure that that's good and straight, or else your pop-up mechanism might be a little bit crooked. It won't pop up into like a perfect box. So to put this in, you're going to fold down the back half so that it looks just like it did there. And then you're going to glue the other tabs and then just keep it in place until the glue sets. So while that glue sets, I'm going to start working on coloring my baking charms. I've die cut most of these from 110 pound Nina Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. And you know me, I like to color my die cuts. So I'm going to start by coloring the mixing bowl, and I'm using reds. And I'm making sure that I leave the white, there's like a white band that goes around, or a band that goes around the mixing bowl, and I decided I'm going to leave that white. So I used R29 as my darker color of red, and I'm going in with R24 for my mid-tone. And then for my lightest color, I'm using R43. And I'm going to do that for the bottom of the bowl as well. Now you don't have to color these die cuts in. You could cut them from 2 different colored cardstock, or you could just cut it from 1 colored cardstock. I just like to color my die cuts because I just find that it adds just that little bit of something extra to the cards. But either way, I think that they'd look good whether you just die cut them from plain cardstock or just colored them in. Or you could even use distress inks too. Okay, so I have my bowl done. I'm going to color the base of the bowl in darker red. So I'm using R59 and then going in with the R29. Just because this is the bottom of the bowl, it's a little darker. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shading to the white area of the band of the bowl, and I'm using N1 for that, just so it has that rounded look to it. And I'm just blending that in with my colorless blender so that it looks a little more faded. And the nice part about this bowl is it has a little die cut at the top so that you could put a utensil into the bowl if you wanted to. So for this one, I'm going to be adding the whisk into the bowl, which I die cut from a shiny silver mirrored cardstock. And as you can see, I'm just testing my mechanism, making sure that it works. Like I said, it's a very, very simple pop-up, but works great for the postage pop-up. And it could be really used for any other kinds of pop-ups too. So as I'm coloring, I'm just setting these aside as I glue them together. For the spatula, I cut it out of silver and out of white, and I'm going to color the handle. So I'm just snipping off that white top of the spatula that I don't need. And then I'm going to go in with my greens. So G29, G07, and then YG25. And then what I'll do is glue that handle onto the silver spatula part. And then I will put that under my craft block to dry. And it kind of shifted, so I'm just making sure that it's in place. And then we're going to move on to the rolling pin. So I'm going to trim off the charm edge because we're not going to be dangling it. And then I'm going to go in with my E colors. So E37. And then E35. And I'm just blending those two colors together. And then my final color is E33, which is called Sand. And then I'm just making sure that I give that a good blending. And then my rolling pin is done. So I'm going to add a little heart to the rolling pin using my R29 and R24 colors. And then I'll just glue that onto the front of my rolling pin. I really love these baking charms. I think they're great. And they work so well with the new postage pop-up. So the next one I'm going to do is the oven mitt, and I'm leaving the little loop on the end there. I'm going to color this with my greens, so G29, then G07, and then YG25. And I wanted to make the oven mitt look almost like plaid. So I went in with my colorless blender and I'm adding lines, both horizontal and vertical, into my oven mitt. And at first it kind of looks funny, but once it gets done, then you'll see it has that kind of plaid look to it. And there we go. So moving on, we're going to color in the wooden spoon. So for this, I'm going in with E59, and I'm just making a shadow around the inner part of the wooden spoon, and then down one part of the handle. And then I'm using E25, as my mid-tone color, and I'm coloring in the whole inside of the wooden spoon. And I'm doing this so that the outer part of the spoon part will show up a little more, and then that centerpiece will look like it dips in how wooden spoons kind of dip in a little bit. Now I'm going to color in my spatula, and I decided to make the top of the spatula red and then the handle white, like a Christmas spatula. So I'm going in with and using the die as a stencil, just so I have an idea of where that center part is. And then I'm going around with my red colors, so the R59 or R29, I'm sorry. And that really comes clean super easy, just a little water and a cloth. And then R24. And then going in with the R43, just to blend that all together. And then I'm using N1 to add the shadow to the handle of my spatula. So now all my baking jars are ready to go. So now we're going to be using A Creature Worth Stirring by Fawn. This is one of my favorite Christmas ones to use. I love these little mice. They're so adorable. So I'm going to be stamping all of my images that I want to use for this card. So I'm using all 3 of the little mice. I'm using the cake stand, and I'm going to use that twice. And I want to use the gingerbread house and the little Christmas cake and the holly decoration. And I don't need to use anything else because we have the baking charms that we're going to be using. I'm using Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'm just inking those up and then using my Misty stamping tool to stamp these. And I usually try and do them 2 or 3 times so I get, a good dark color on there. And now we're going to color these using Copic markers, and I'm just going to let you watch that and enjoy. So I've die cut all of those little images out using the corresponding dies, and now I'm going to get started on my inside postage pop-up. So this card, I decided to make a window card, and I'm sure that there are a couple of ways that you could do a window card like this, and I should have done this before I put the pop-up mechanism inside. To start, I'm only going to take one side of the tape off of the back of this so that I can put in the piece of acetate for the window. This die, the postage pop-up die, comes with little die cuts that fit into each of the little postage areas that you can see on that little white die cut that I have there. That's the inside of the postage pop-up. That's what goes on to the pop-up mechanism. So I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum die cut machine, and I'm just going to place the postage pop-up die cut on the front of my card in the way that I want it to go. And I'm using this Craft Perfect removable tape. I really recommend this tape. It doesn't pull on your paper. It doesn't tear or rip your actual work. It can get cut while you're using it in your die cut machine. But for the most part, it is a really good repositionable tape. Sometimes I find that the pink pixie tape will tear at my die cuts when I use them in the die cut machine. So I found this Craft Perfect removable tape from Simon Says Stamps, and I really like it. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting in the inner little die cuts that come with the set, and then I'm going to remove the outer piece because I don't want to cut out the whole thing. I just want to cut out the little windows. So now that that's all in place, I can place them onto my die cutting plate and then run it through my machine. But I can't run the whole card through the machine because the pop mechanism's in there. I wasn't thinking that through. And so I'm just running it halfway through and trying to position this die cut machine and get it into the camera at the same time. I have a counter that this sits on, and that's where I usually do my die cutting, is on that counter. That's why you don't really see me die cutting on my table, but I wanted to show how to make this window. So now, unfortunately, the die cuts didn't go all the way through, but I did use my X-Acto knife and cut what was remaining. You could run it through a couple more times if you wanted to, but I just used my X-Acto knife. Now I have a piece of acetate cut to fit that inside area, and I'm just adding some double-sided adhesive tape to that so that the acetate will stick to that. And then I'll have to put double-sided adhesive tape on top of the acetate as well to hold the frame in on the front, which you'll see in a second. So for these 3 cards, I tried to do something different for each one. And this first one is a window one with the postage pop-up. So I'm just removing that tape, and then I will put down my piece of acetate. And that is just a Lawn Fawn. It's not super thin, but it's not super thick, and you can get it in a 10-pack. And that's usually what I use for this when I do window cards or shaker cards. So I'm just putting that double-sided adhesive onto my acetate. And then I have the backing of my pattern paper already set with double-sided adhesive. So I just have to remove those pieces, and then I can place my pattern paper down to create the front of the window card. Now again, like I said, this would be a lot easier if I had done this before I'd put the pop-up mechanism in, but live and learn. So don't make my mistake. Do it ahead of time and then add your pop-up mechanism. And I'm just gluing in here because I had totally taped down that back section, not even thinking about adding the window. It's just one of those days, I think. So I have cut 2 frames the same way as I did the window, except I kept the postage pop-up part. Now for the inside window, you're going to have to use the back part of the die cut. So I'm sure, you see that when you die cut something, the front always looks really good. The back looks a little different. It's not as embossed or as nice, but it's going to be part of the inside of the card. And actually it turned out pretty good. So I'm just going to glue that in basically upside down. And then there's the frame and the window for my first pop-up card. So now we can actually start working on the inner pop-up piece that's going to be what you see when you open the card. So I'm going to just use some repositionable, it's like a glue dot runner. And I'm going to use my pink pixie tape to tape off the edges of my postage pop-up. Because what I want to do is add some color to the background. But I don't want to use the little dies that come with the postage pop-up to make like frames. I wanted it to be thinner than that. And when you die cut the postage pop-up, you'll see there's almost like an embossed frame that goes around each box. And so I just taped that off at that point. And then I'm using my Waffle Flower brushes to brush on Simon Says Stamps Positively Saturated inks. So for this first one, I'm using Latte and Cappuccino. I really love Simon Says Stamps Positively Saturated inks. They are fantastic and dry quickly, which I really like. So I'm just repositioning that, and I put it in the wrong spot and then realized and then moved it. And it just needs to go up a little bit so that when you're done, you have this really great postage frame all the way around it. And for this one, I'm using Lemonade, and I'm also using Sunbeam, which is just a slightly darker yellow. And then for this next section, I'm going to be using Sprout and Fairway, which is a really pretty green set. It comes, I love buying it in the 3s because then you get a light, a medium, and a dark. Now for this one, I used Guava and Watermelon, which is almost like a reddish pink color. And I just used each of the light and medium colors for all of these. Now I'm just going to remove my tape, and then you can see that really great white border all the way around each postage stamp. And I'm just removing that little bit of sticky backing. Now before I get started on decorating this, I wanted to add my sentiment stamp first. So I'm using Karen Burniston's Sweet Treats sentiment stamps, which were perfect for this type of card. And I used the ones sending freshly baked and warm hugs. And again, I'm just using my Lawn Fawn jet black ink to stamp that. And now I'm going to decorate that piece. And right now it's just figuring out where I want to put all my little die cuts and the little mice, which work really well with the baking charms. And once I have that figured out, then I can glue them down. But first, I want to use the bowl in this larger postage stamp, so I have to kind of trim it to fit that corner. So I'm just made a little mark on the top of the whisk, and then I can fit it into that corner. So I'm just using my adhesive glue to glue that down. and making sure that that fits into that corner, and then that the bowl bottom is on the bottom of the postage stamp as well. And then I'm going to add my little mouse with his cute little oven mitts. And then I'm just going to glue down the rest of my little die cuts. And like I said, the stamp set works really, really well with the baking charms. Okay, so now I'm adding some glossy accents just to the little red berries. And I had to clear out the top of my tube. It wasn't working. And I'm just going to set that aside to dry. It should only take about a half an hour to fully dry. And now while that's drying, I can kind of add my gingerbread house to my little cake table. And I'm going to add some glossy accents and some red glitter gel to my gingerbread house as well. So for the red, I'm using a red Stickles glitter gel. And then for the green, I just used glossy accents. Normally, I would use my Stardust stickles as well on top of the house and on top of the little cake on my postage pop-up, but I'm out of that right now. Unfortunately, my local Michaels does not sell that, so it's something I have to order in. And you just glue that whole part of the mechanism and then push it down, and that's it. Postage pop-up is such a simple, easy mechanism, but wow, is it ever great. So now I'm just trying to figure out where to add all my little extra die cuts. And I also need to add a place to sign the card. So I've decided to add a little mouse and the gingerbread house to the front of the card. And I'm just going to glue those down. And then I decided that the front really needed a sentiment. So I'm also going to add a sentiment to the front of my card as well. And I was like, that mouse needs to hold something. So I also gave the little spatula to the little mouse. I guess it's not a little spatula compared to that mouse. I'm just giving that a good press so that it gets glued down, but the little mouse needed a little more glue. So I'm just going to add my other little utensils into the inside of my card. And like I said, you don't have to color these baking charms. You could just die cut them and then use them that way. It is a little extra time to color everything. So I'm taking, I die cut another postage pop-up, and I'm just folding the edges to get the postage pieces to separate, and then just giving it a little tug. And I'm just gluing that in place, and that is going to be where you can sign the card. And I just couldn't figure out where to put the rolling pins, so I thought, oh, you know what, I'll add it to the bottom of the little area where you sign the card. And this is where I'm thinking it needs a sentiment. It needs something green. So I decided to use the Not a Creature Was Stirring Except in the Kitchen to go on the front. And I used a really nice green cardstock to stamp that onto. I just die cut strips that would fit on the front of the card. And then I'm using my Misty stamping tool as well as Versamark ink and white embossing powder. And please excuse my head in the way. It happens a few times to make sure that I have good placement. I like to stamp the Versamark ink at least 2 or 3 times so that I know that I get a good amount of ink on there. And then I have this great little container that I have my white embossing powder in. Unfortunately, the little tab at the top that holds the spoon, it broke off, so my spoon sits in my embossing powder. That's why I use my tweezers so I don't get white embossing powder all over my fingers. And I'm just using my Wagner heat gun to set that embossing powder. And then I just wipe it down with a cloth once I'm done to get rid of any excess static powder off. So there's one, and now we're going to do the second one. And I do it in the exact same way. And this card is probably one of my favorites out of the three because it's a baking card. And over the holidays, baking is definitely my thing. My husband always says Christmas is not the time to be on a diet in our house because I make all kinds of treats like butter tarts and cookies and squares. And so this is definitely the house of sweet treats at Christmas time. I'm just going to glue those sentiments onto the front of my card. And I'm just trying to center them with the Postage Pop-Up front window there. Now, I felt like it needed something else on the inside, so I decided to die cut a postage pop-up from the same green cardstock I used for the sentiment on the front. And I'm just going to add another sentiment to the inside of this card. So for this one, I'm using the smallest little postage stamp. And at this one, I'm going to use the Season of Cheer sentiment stamp set. It's so easy to pull these little postage pieces away from each other, which is handy if you want to just make a little stamp or something. And you'll see that we do that in the last card that we have today. So I'm just putting that in place. And I'm going to also be using Versamark ink and white embossing powder for this sentiment as well. And then I'll use my heat gun to set that embossing powder. And it doesn't take long for this heat gun to warm up. I really like that heat gun. I think that was a Christmas gift I got a few years ago. So I'm just going to glue that last little bit into my card. And then this card is finished. So for our second card, I'm going to be making a A2 regular sized card using the Postage Pop-Up as well. And this time we're going to also be using the new snow charms that Karen came out with this last release. Now I started with the idea that I would use the little pieces that you can add on to the Postage Pop-Up, but I decided in the end not to do that. But to start, we're using a heavyweight smooth white cardstock for the card base. And I'm just folding that in half and using my bone folder to get a good fold. And then I'm going to add my pattern paper. And I used Echo Park snowed in pattern paper. I like this. I thought it looked like a Christmas sweater, which was perfect for the theme of this card. And is also my designer challenge for the month of November, which was Christmas cheer. And I thought, when I think of Christmas, I think of not just having my family together and, a dinner and gifts, but also sitting on the couch with my kids and watching Christmas movies and having hot chocolate. And, I think back to when I was a kid and my dad used to take me ice skating, which I was not very good at, but I still did it, and tobogganing and, stuff like that. So I thought that pattern paper, which looked like a sweater, was perfect for that. So for the pop-up mechanism this time, I'm actually using the same heavyweight white cardstock as the card base. And I definitely recommend using an 80-pound or heavier cardstock for this, because that little pull mechanism needs a little bit of weight to it. So I wouldn't suggest using like the 65-pound cardstock, especially for that little pull mechanism that is what tugs the pop-up up when you open the card. So I'm just centering it and then making sure it's good and straight, and then placing that down, and then just push the back up, glue the other tabs, making sure that they're straight, because you do have a little bit of wiggle room with this, and then closing the card to set that all in place. And I like to use my craft block just to set it, and then I'm just making sure that glue has set and that those tabs are flat on the card. Okay, so moving on, I did first, like I said before, start with the dark blue postage pop-up and then adding the little white blocks that go inside of it. And that's why you're going to see it in the top part of my video here, but I decided not to go that route. I couldn't fit things in properly, and it didn't look good, so I decided to make my own backgrounds with stencils instead. But to start, we are going to get all of the snow charm die cuts ready, and I'm just starting with the skates. So I've die cut skates from silver cardstock and white cardstock, and I'm just trimming off the skate pieces to add onto the top of the silver skates, so that just the blade is silver and the rest of the skate is white. And then this die cut also comes with the boot piece, so you don't have to cut it out 3 times. And it also comes with these cute little laces that go up the top of the skates. So to color the heels, I'm using 100 black, and I'm using N6. And just those 2 colors, nothing fancy. Just to give it just a little bit of dimension. And now I'm just going to add those onto the skates. And then making sure that those are good and straight. And then adding my pretty little red laces to my skates. When I was a kid and my dad used to take me ice skating, he used to have to sand the spikes on the front of the skates off because I kept tripping. So he would sand them down and then he would tape them up, and then I could skate, but I wasn't very good at it. I'm just going in with E50 just to add some shadow to the skate. And there's one done, and then I'm going to do the same for the other skate as well. This charm set is really, really cute, and it has a set of mittens, a pair of skates, a toboggan, a snow angel, which could also be made into like an ornament. And there's a stamp set on the new sentiment stamp called Winter Hugs that fits that little snow angel, and you'll see I do that in a little bit. But it's nice that all the sentiment stamps coordinate well with the different things. So as you can see, I was testing this out. I didn't like just the white background. I should have colored them in, and I could have just done that, but I decided to just create a whole new postage pop-up for this one. So now I'm coloring the mittens, and I decided to do the mittens blue. I wanted to try and keep with the blue theme. So I'm using B18 to add the darker areas to my mittens. And then I'm going in with B05. And then for my lightest color, I'm going in with the B02. And then just blending that all together. Now, the die cut comes with the little white cuffs. And I know it's hard to see in the video, but they have like a little embossed ribbing to it. So I'm just adding those onto the tops of the mittens. And then I colored those. It also has the 2 little hearts that come with it. And I colored those little hearts in with my reds. And then I added those to the front of the mittens. Now, before I did that, you'll see that I go in with my colorless blender. And I did that because I wanted to try and make it look like knitted mitts. I don't know if you knit or if you have a grandmother or had a grandmother that knitted. My nan knitted, and she used to knit all of us grandkids sweaters and mittens and all these things. So I kind of wanted to give it that knitted look. So before I put the heart on, that's when I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to add that. And I just made little dots to try and make it look like knitted. It didn't work out great, but I did try. Now you could also do like a crosshatch pattern as well, and that might look more like knitted. And now I can just add my little hearts on. These mittens are so cute. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm going to be masking off the Postage Pop-Up again. And then I'm going to be using My Favorite Things Winter Stencil strips and Simon Says Stamps Positively Saturated ink in Seafoam, Surf, and Ocean, as well as Hero Arts Shadow ink in Pool. So now we have our Postage Pop-Up for the inside done. Now I'm going to be working on the snow angel. So I've die cut 2 pieces from a light blue cardstock, and I'm just going to be gluing those together. Now you could make this more layers if you would like, and then it gives it a little more dimension. And then I die cut the little snow angel from white cardstock as well. And I'm going to stamp that little sentiment onto the front that is part of the Winter Hugs sentiment stamp set. See, and it fits just perfect in the little bottom of the snow angel. Making snow angels is one of my son's favorite things to do when we have to go out to shovel the driveway. He goes and plays in the snow and I shovel the driveway, and then he will pretend to be at the edge and I'll throw snow on him. And then he makes snow angels and snowmen and has all kinds of fun out there. So now I'm going to be coloring the toboggan. So for this, I'm going in with E37. E35, and then just blending those two together as best I can. It is a tiny little area, but this just adds some extra dimension to the toboggan. And then E33. Now for those little pieces in the center, I'm going in with a dark brown, so E59, just to make that top part pop. And I was going to do that little piece brown as well, but I decided to do it in gray. So I'm using N6 and N4. And then N2. Now for the other part of the toboggan, I decided to go with red color. So R29 to add the shadow areas, and then R24 for the rest of the toboggan. And I just thought that that little pop of red would look really nice on my blue card. So I'm going to glue these together. The top little piece of the toboggan that's red goes over onto the wooden piece, and I'm just gluing that in place. And just adding a little bit of glue there. And then it's literally just little dabs of glue here and there to create this little toboggan. Now you can add a string to the top. There's also 2 little indents. It's not a hole that's cut, but there's 2 little indents on there to show you where like a rope would go to pull the toboggan. And you can pop those out with like a sharp tool and then add your string to that, but I decided not to do that. So I'm putting in the postage pop-up, but this needs to be moved further in. So it's actually going to cover the entire, pretty much the entire pop-up mechanism, and I apologize for my head. I realize how very gray my hair is every time my head comes into view. So there's my pop-up mechanism inside the card, and as you can see, it does cover the little pull tab underneath, which is kind of nice because now it looks like it's floating. And I had this little great, there's a 12 by 12 piece that came with the paper pack, and it had these little great things on them, and I thought, oh, the winter checklist would go perfect with my little snow charms. You know, go ice skating, go sledding, snow angels. I thought, oh, that's perfect. Catching snowflakes. It's like all the fun things to do in the wintertime. Now I needed to add a little place to sign the card. I know it doesn't give you much room, but at least it's a little spot that you could sign your name. And I was thinking, add something else, but no, I'm going to leave it as is. And I'm going to add those to the front. So I thought this front piece needs something else with it. So here I'm just going to do the exact same thing I did before. And I'm just taping all that up and then adding backgrounds to it. So I'm just adding that stamp set that works so well with this card, with the Winter Hug Sentiment stamp. And now I'm just trying to place where I'm going to add the rest of my snow charms. So I decided to trim off the little loop part on the top of the toboggan, and then I'm marking off the bottom piece that I have to trim so it would fit into the postage stamp area. Now I'm just gluing that in. And then I'm going to be adding that to my card. So before I get it pushed right down, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of twine to make a little handle for my toboggan. So I'm just pulling that up off of the background a little bit and then adding a tiny bit of glue and then just gluing that baker's twine underneath the silver part or the gray part of my toboggan. And I just had to trim it a little shorter and then turning that around, and then I'll glue the other half under the other half of the toboggan. If that makes sense, and I'm very sorry if it doesn't. And then I'm just going to add a little drop of glue onto the base of the toboggan to hold the handle straight so that it looks like it's just sitting there. Now I would have added the snowflake background before I put my toboggan on, but I didn't think about that. So I'm just adding some snowflakes using a white size 10 jelly pen. And now I'm going to add my little snow angel. And for that final little box, I was out of snow charms, so I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to add some mugs for hot chocolate. So I trimmed off a tea and coffee border of the coffee mugs. And I'm just taking 2 of those mugs and adding them to the front of my card. So I'm going to color these in red colors because I thought that that would be another bit of color pop on my blue background. And then I decided I wanted to add the little bit of steam that comes with these little coffee mugs. There's a die that will cut 4 little, it looks like steam coming off your mug. So once I have these all colored in, I'm going to add the steam, and I also draw a little snowflake onto the front of my coffee mugs using the white size 10 jelly pen as well. And there you can see it looks a little bit of steam coming off of my hot cocoa. Or hot chocolate, whatever you call it. In our house, we call it hot chocolate. So I just make like a cross and then add little pieces into the edges of the cross, and then add little dots to the ends of each little arm. And there's my little snowflakes. So I'm going to glue those onto the last little postage pop-up stamp area. And then we'll place that on the front of the card. But like I said earlier, I thought that the background needed a little something extra. And on the back of my pattern paper is that dark blue with snowflake, I guess background. I don't know. It looked really pretty. So I thought, you know what, I'd add a strip of that to the background of it. Even though that's not in the inside of my card, I just felt like the front needed something else. So I'm just adding that piece on, and then adding my postage pop-up on the front. And I was trying to decide, do I want to add another sentiment to that front piece? And I got thinking, you know what would be nice is like a little banner. And I got one of those, you know, you spend so much, you get something free at My Favorite Things. And I got this elegant folded banner one time. And it makes such a pretty little banner that you can go on to your cards. So I decided to use that in red to go onto the front of this card. And it worked out really well. So I'm just gluing the postage stamps onto the front of my card. Making sure that that's set. And now I've die cut that banner. And I'm going to add a little sentiment to the front of it. And for that, I used a really pretty little stamp set that I got from Fawn that uses little wavy sentiments, and it's a Christmas one. And I used the one that said, "Let it snow." So I'm just centering that, and then I will use my static powder and then my Versamark ink and white embossing powder. Now this little banner folds the edges up, so it actually almost looks like a 3-dimensional banner that you can use on your cards. I don't know if this is something that they still have. That's one thing I have to say that I really love about Karen Burniston's products is that she doesn't get rid of anything. It's there. So if you see something and then later on you're like, oh, you know, I really wanted that, it's still there. So you just fold these little edges in, and then I just added a little drop of glue onto each piece and then push those down. And then the same on the other side. And then that's our elegant little banner. And that card's done. So let's move on to our last card, and I apologize for this taking so long for this video. I didn't intend for it to be almost an hour and a half, but there was so much stuff that I wanted to show you that you could do with this postage stamp pop-up. So I understand if it's a long video and you don't want to watch the whole thing, or you want to watch it a little at a time. I just appreciate you taking the time to check out my cards, and I hope that it inspires you to create your own postage pop-ups and your own Christmas cards, or whatever you wanted to create with that. So I used this really cool candy cane pattern paper for this card. I haven't always been into pattern paper, but lately it's just been Echo Park. I love Echo Park pattern paper, and every time I get a order from Amazon, my husband's like, more paper? So you can't have enough. You never know what you're going to need. So again, I'm just placing the pattern paper down onto the back of this card. And then the same for the other side. So this card is going to be more like an actual postage card. I'm going to be turning the little postage stamps into what looks like postage stamps. So instead of just making little backgrounds for them, we're actually going to be using the postage stamp, sentiment stamp that Karen made called Special Delivery. So we're going to be using pieces of that, as well as some of the postage stamps from Waffle Flower, and their postage collage stencil as well for the front. So I'm just putting the mechanism again into my card. And when you do a side fold card, it doesn't really matter where you put the actual pop-up piece, because you have enough space. It's only when it's like an A2 regular size card that you have to make sure that you move the flat piece, the postage piece, a little further into the card so it will fit. So once I have that glued down, and I'm just going to use my craft block to put that in place so that the glue can set, making sure that, everything is working. Now we can get started on the inside of our card. Now for the inside of this card, I decided to use Mama Elephant's little agenda trains and the little elf agendas. So there are these tiny little itty bitty cute little stamps with elves and Santa and trains and different things. So I'll be using masking paper as well to create my backgrounds and to add my stamping. Okay, so I'm going to create a frame to go around the postage stamps. So I'm just using my X-Acto knife to make some little trims, and then I'm going in with my scissors. And I could have used my X-Acto knife to just trim each one, but I was too afraid that it would slip and I would end up cutting the whole thing in half. So I just thought I'll make a little incision and then go in with my craft scissors to trim out the rest of the postage piece, so that you just have this really great little border. And then I'm going to glue that on to my postage stamp pop-up and then place that into my card. So I'm going to also create some more postage stamps to go onto the inner panel of this card as well, using the same stamp sets as before. So now that the inside of our card is done, I'm going to create a postcard front for our card, which is something that I did for my blog hop card. And I thought it came out so good and I really, really liked it. It was something kind of unique. So if you don't have a stamp set that makes like a postcard looking front, this is another way to do that. So I'm using the same stamp set that of the Mama Elephant Little Elf Agenda to create a little elf for the front of my stamp. And then coloring in that with Copic markers, adding my little, how many cents my stamp is. And then we're going to add that to the front of a piece of white heavyweight cardstock. Now I'm using the Waffle Flowers Postage Collage Stencil to create the like postage band that you see on like a postcard. And I'm using Mowed Lawn and Candied Apple as well as Salty Ocean to create this band. And those are all the Distress Oxide inks. Now I'm adding the word postcard using Karen Burniston's mini alphabet and numbers and red cardstock. I'm just using my ruler to keep all of the letters straight. And I'm just gluing those down. And now I'm going to add some lines with a black pen, like where you would put your little message or the address. And I have this stamp set that I got a long time ago. And I'm going to use that like it's going to Santa Claus. So I'm using some of the postage stamps from Karen Burniston. I'm using some postage stamps from Waffle Flower. And I'll have all of those listed in the description box below. Now these are the little letters that come from this really cool stamp set. And it's a stamp set from Simon Says Stamps called Christmas Cheer. And I'm just adding some more postage marks. And then we can add that to the front of our card. And I think the postcard really suits with the postage pop-up. And here's all our finished cards. So it just goes to show you that you can use one pop-up die and create 3 different but really pretty Christmas cards. Perfect for the season. So be sure to check out Karen Burniston's new release. There's so many wonderful dies and stamps. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great day.